The Duke of the North pinned the young woman against the wall. Touching her soft cheek, he warned her never to try and leave him. The heroine tried to explain to His Grace that things weren't what they seemed, but he told her to be quiet and in a low voice asked her to call him by his name, not his title. Beneath strands of black hair, his crimson eyes shone so brightly, it felt like she was about to be consumed by them. The sharp howl of the wind seemed to fade away, creating the sensation that only the two of them were left in this place, or even in the whole world. The main character squealed with delight. This author's writing skills are seriously off the charts. Right at the juiciest part, when the Duke was getting close to the girl, a maid interrupted, announcing a guest from the imperial palace. Clizia Meggerino was the only daughter of Viscount Meggerino, born in the quiet Shumarin estate. And get this, Clizia thought she founded the Northern Duke Research Center at Shumarin Academy. In other words, she's got a major crush on those Northern Duke romance novels. The heroine's biggest dream? Marrying the Duke of the North. The maid was super worried about the young lady, hoping nothing too bad happened since someone from the palace showed up. Clizia was sure everything was fine, seeing as she'd never even been to the capital, let alone the palace. But things were about to get real complicated. This handsome blonde guy tells Lady Clizia she's exactly as he pictured her, then drops the bomb that His Majesty wants a divorce, which totally throws her for a loop since she's never even met him. Turns out, the temple made a mistake registering the marriage. So, according to the official records, the heroine's currently married to the emperor. Things couldn't get any worse. According to imperial law, after a divorce, the former empress has to spend 10 years in seclusion. In return, His Majesty offered a substantial payout, promising vast lands, riches, and estates. Clizia screamed loud enough for the whole estate to hear, calling it a load of bull. Her fiery spirit was in full revolt, and only her father, Viscount Isaac Meggerino, could restrain her outbursts. With that, the handsome blonde bowed and took his leave. The main character indignantly asked her father if he wasn't furious at this treatment, since they weren't the ones who screwed up. To which her father replied that they couldn't disobey an imperial decree. In the past, Isaac Meggerino was a commoner knight, and 10 years ago, he received the title of Viscount and an estate for his military service. He's a truly loyal subject, ready to give his life for the empire. But now Clizia didn't see the point in it anymore. Just so you know, the main character's got her own agenda too, seeing as she wants to marry the Duke of the North. Right when Clizia started feeling sorry for herself, a phoenix flew in and said being tied down by human rules just plain sucks. The main character was stoked to see Cucus. The bird told her not to get down and reminded the lady, yet again, that she's part of the great bonds that control the flow of the world. The girl couldn't listen to that garbage anymore, so she decided she wasn't gonna sacrifice herself anymore, like her dad did way back when. The lady decided to stir up some trouble at the temple and make them fix things. And if that doesn't work, she's hitting up the imperial palace. Clizia needs to see the face of the guy they're calling her husband in person. Disguised as a young dude, the main character was planning on getting into the stables. But right at the entrance, her dad showed up, all suited up in armor and armed to the teeth. Isaac saw right through his daughter's plan, so he declared that if she really wanted to go, she'd have to take down the Red Lion first. Clizia handled her old man without breaking a sweat. She'd mastered the fire rune enough to hold her own in a fight, no problem. The servant suggested the Viscount send someone after the lady, since she'd already gone through the main gate. But the knight just smirked and refused. They'd done everything they could to try and stop her from running off. It was time for Clizia to make her own choices. Time to test herself with some real challenges. Muta City was known as a paradise for travelers and the empire's biggest trading hub. It's the only route from the south to the capital, so merchants and all kinds of travelers end up here, which means the place is always packed with people and overflowing with cash. And after 3 days, Clizia finally made it there herself. The main character's horse caught a whiff of some tasty meat and tried to snatch it, but she yanked back hard on the reins. She told Shukram to snap out of it, because nobody could know he was a hybrid horse. Once they got to the capital, they could really chow down. Then, the main character went to rent a room and order some grub. Even though she was kinda scrawny, she was wolfing down that meat like a total dude, 'cause she was starving. Clizia wondered if she should leave some for Shukrim, but she quickly changed her mind, since it was too risky and they could get busted. Shukrim was a hybrid horse, and his kind were ancient creatures, a mix of dragon and horse. In other words, you could call him a sacred beast. Beasts like that are hard to find outside the emperor's family, but Clizia got lucky and just picked it up off the road. She literally just stumbled across it in the street, right in the middle of a battlefield. The war with the Servan Empire lasted 10 years, and Clydia grew up as it raged on. Her father often took the little one with him to the battlefields, and when she turned 10, the war finally ended. But now, just when Clydia decides to enjoy her youth, they tell her she has to spend another 10 years in exile. The main character was really hoping the emperor would be a reasonable guy. Muta, the Furza Empire's biggest trading city, and they're the ones who run it. In some ways, they have even more power than the imperial family or the temple, and we're talking about Tom Holdings Corporation. It's crazy that it's all in the hands of one young dude. While Tom was listening to his subordinate's report, something caught his eye, specifically the horse, which is why he was asking how it got here. The stable hand ran up to the boss and explained that a guest at Tom's inn had left the animal. He's probably not from a noble family, more likely just a regular Joe. A sly grin spread across Tom's lips. The dark-haired guy ordered them to find out as much as they could about this guest. Luke decided to ask the boss why he was suddenly so interested in the horse. Tom explained that it wasn't just any horse, it was a hybrid, which means he's no ordinary guy, leading us to believe the guest has his own reasons for hiding his identity. But if this is the Emperor trying to plant someone on us, things just got real. Outside, it was the dead of night, and our main girl was out like a light. She had no idea that bandits had broken into her room. Looking at the girl, the guys figured she seemed more like a runaway noble than your average commoner. That's not gonna fool the legendary Knight brothers, though, 'cause nothing worth stealing gets past them. They were sure the girl wouldn't wake up, since she'd eaten a ton of those forest mushroom dust in her food earlier, so they could just grab all her stuff without a problem. The guys thought they'd hit the jackpot, finally finding someone who wasn't broke as hell. The bandits didn't realize the girl was already awake and reaching for her weapon. One of the guys froze, hearing a thud and a distinct bang against the wall. He didn't know what the heck was going on, and the main character was already winding up for another hit. Clydia grabbed him by the throat and slammed him hard against the wall. She asked in an icy voice how they dared disturb Krita. Turns out, Clydia handled those two thugs no problem, and now they're kneeling before her, all submissive. She warned them both to tell the truth, since they tried to snatch her precious Krita. But the hero replied that it wasn't like that at all. They didn't even know who Krita was. They were just thieves looking to score a few coins. Clytia wasn't buying that these pathetic little thieves just happened to pick her room. But it was the truth, because the guys were just looking to cash in on young and inexperienced travelers. Usually, the famous brothers, well known around here, slip sleeping powder into the visitors' food. Clydia knew that was expensive, but the brothers replied that they use forest mushroom powder instead. The guys were stunned when the main character revealed that it doesn't work on her. Clytia's dad was in a night squad with people Clytia called her uncles and aunts. One of them was a young warrior, known as Aunt Lance, who'd earned a rep as a medical genius. She made a huge difference during battles with her meds. But the thing is, she got super attached to Clytia. Lance's super precise approach to dosages gave Clytia a crazy strong immunity to poisons. So basically, almost no poison could touch her. Clytia decided to turn the bandits into the city guard. The brothers started begging her to show some mercy, just this once. They promised they wouldn't steal anymore, saying they were driven to it by hunger and desperation. That's all. Their mom's really sick, so they're struggling to find money for her medicine. Right then, the manager knocked on the door and asked the guest if everything was all right. The brothers were freaked out, and Clytia cursed under her breath. Pointing at the window, she told the two of them to grab the cash and get the hell out of her room. Then, she tossed a few gold coins onto the floor. Clytia told the little thieves to see this as a chance to clean up their act and start living right. She ordered the brothers to absolutely use that money for medicine for their sick mom. Moonlight lit up the main character's face, and the guys froze, staring and asking if she was the Crimson Witch. That pissed Clytia off, and the guys immediately started apologizing, saying they just misspoke, and hurried to gather the coins. The brothers quickly left the main character's room, not understanding how she could even believe that crap about their parents. Still, the thought crossed their minds that maybe they should quit. The manager with the frying pan peeked into Clytia's room, and she calmed him down, explaining she was just trying to swat a bug. The main character didn't remember her mom at all, so that's probably why she got so emotional. Whipping around, she suddenly asked if he was in on it too. The spy under the window froze, and then he bolted. Tom got the report. The guy's name is Sasha Lin, and he paid with gold coins from the central bank. When the kid arrived, he was covered head to toe in dust and grime, but he walked right up to the clerk and asked for a room and some grub. He ate like he hadn't seen food in days. but he still had some manners. Tom figured he was probably some young nobleman from the south. The hybrid horse in the stable looked completely drained. You'd have to ride it non-stop for at least 3 days to get it that beat up. Just then, someone knocked on the Lord's door. Slipping inside, the spy reported he'd successfully carried out the surveillance, just like he was ordered. Besides him, the so-called Knight brothers were at the designated location. The spy moved closer, ready to jump in and help the kid if needed, but he handled it no problem. And get this, he's immune to poison. As soon as the guest even got a whiff of him, he immediately backed off. Can't say for sure what rune he's using yet, but chances are we're dealing with a rune wielder. Tom asked Luke if there was any word from the Zen elders, and the secretary said there wasn't. They sent some financial reports from Xena, nothing out of the ordinary. Tom was starting to seriously suspect this guy was an agent of His Majesty. So the dark-haired guy asked Luke to set up a meeting, but it's gotta look completely natural. 20 years ago, the continent of Ashi was consumed by the flames of imperial ambition. The imperial family, with the power to shatter minds, rampaged across nations, leaving ruin in their wake. And just when the whole continent was about to collapse, the Furza Empire, led by the Knight Iser, successfully reclaimed the vast southern lands. That's what earned him the title of the Crimson Lion. It marked the beginning of an even more brutal war between the two empires. Then, after 9 agonizing years of war, the tables turned in an instant, all thanks to one guy, who personally took care of those Servan imperial family members. This military and strategic mastermind united 70% of the entire continent under his banner and ended the war. It was the 16-year-old crown prince of the Fursa Empire, known as Ian Fursa, who became the youngest emperor in history. In his 9 years of rule, he managed to stabilize the entire geopolitical situation. But now, the 4th emperor just found out he's apparently already married. They told him the temple screwed up, and the registration actually happened 3 years ago. So, according to the official papers, the great emperor is already married. Yang waved his hand, asking them to just quietly fix it, make the whole mess disappear. But that was a no-go, because the marriage process is under the temple's control, and the palace can't interfere. The room went silent. The imperial advisor freaked when His Majesty reached for the documents. The great Emperor Yang Fursa, war hero and savior of an entire continent, is about to show his true colors without an audience. Namely, the personality of a stone-cold nutcase, and also a rabid dog, a lowlife, and a sadist. In a fit of rage, the emperor ordered Miri to set up a meeting with the high priest, ASAP. The imperial advisor promised to get it done ASAP. Deep down, the count was praying to every god he knew that the temple could fix this. But the high priest just shut him down, said it was impossible. Birth certificates, engagement records, the whole shebang for the imperial family. It's all handled by the temple. It's a rock-solid rule, put in place to stop any shady business inside the imperial palace. So even the emperor can't just go in and change stuff. But this wasn't about some simple edit. It was a mistake made by the temple, and it needed to be fixed pronto. The high priest explained that documents can be edited within a year, but after that, they're blessed and sealed up tight. Yan wanted to know if getting everyone involved to testify would affect the document's legitimacy. But how was the emperor going to prove his legal wife wasn't being pressured by an emperor who'd suddenly changed his mind? The blonde guy, ice in his voice, snapped at the priest, asking if he even understood what he was accusing him of. The air crackled with tension, and the high priest's tea turned to solid ice in a heartbeat. Miri, scared stiff, begged His Majesty to call off the rune, reminding him they were still in the holy temple. The temple's head honcho calmly explained to the emperor that the laws should apply to him even stricter than to everyone else. Therefore, the high priest declared that His Majesty's marriage would not be annulled. Yan slammed his fist against the wall, pure rage fueling him. The thought flashed through his mind that he could just burn the whole darn temple to the ground, and his people would just get used to a new religion. Time for the imperial advisor to explain how this whole mess even started in the first place. It all kicked off a few years back, when His Majesty got buried under a mountain of paperwork. But instead of dealing with it himself, the emperor ordered Miri to sort the whole thing out. The advisor explained he couldn't sign them off himself, some paperwork the emperor needed to see personally. The rebels were still plotting an assassination, hoping they could take down Ian for good. The emperor just told his advisor to hold back all the documents, not send them out. Miri tried to explain there might be something really important in those documents, but the emperor repeated, "Don't send anything." And that's basically how this whole mess started. The emperor slammed the advisor against the wall and snarled that he should have prevented any potential problems. Just then, someone walked into the room, saving Count Miri from getting seriously hurt. The emperor's younger brother, Ryan Furza, said they'd definitely find a way out of this. Divorce might be the solution to this whole thing. Right now, it's the only way out. Look, the records will still be there, but nobody's going to be snooping around in them, so it's not a bad option. The emperor wanted to know, who the heck is this woman? So the advisor filled him in. She's the eldest daughter of Viscount Meggerino. Jan was thinking, is this seriously Sir Isaac's daughter? From what Miri knew, he was a knight who rose from the ranks, got the Viscount title for his service to the Empire. The emperor waved his hand and said to forget about the divorce. This lady's barely out of her teens, and she'd be branded a divorcee, plus she'd be stuck in exile for a decade. The imperial advisor couldn't believe the emperor was actually worried about someone other than himself. Miri explained that Lady Cletia would actually benefit from the divorce, since she'd get all the perks of a former empress. But the bottom line is, these guys are playing with this young lady's future. So, Ryan suggested we hold a national day of mourning. Not just the advisors, even the ruthless emperor himself was taken aback by his younger brother's proposal. If that option didn't work, Ryan suggested his brother just marry the girl. The emperor started to boil with rage, and Miri, scared, begged Sir Ryan to stop. But it was too late, as Jan suggested his younger brother step outside for a moment. In the Furza Empire, there are two main types of magic. First, there's magic summoned using minerals, so-called mana stones, which work based on complex rituals and calculations. Second, there's rune magic, which relies on natural forces by accumulating them in the mage's body. In this world, magic is widespread and used for routine needs, readily available thanks to the mana stones. However, rune magic requires specific physiological traits and isn't accessible to just anyone. In other words, a person's gotta have a natural gift. In the Furza Empire, there are people with crazy combat and magic skills, and they call them rune knights. The wind rune, also known as the force of flow, is the most effective for fighting. That's why most rune knights, including Sir Ryan, chose the wind rune. On the flip side, the ice rune, also known as the force of frost, is considered way less effective in battle. But the emperor didn't give a damn about that. Ryan froze up, scared stiff, when lightning struck right next to him. He was in shock that his older brother could channel such powerful energy from a regular training sword. So, he decided to create some distance, ASAP. But the blondie didn't notice his foot was already frozen to the ground. Jan grinned and swung his sword, leaving Ryan no choice but to concede defeat. Even so, the emperor still landed the blow. Jan controls all 5 elemental runes, which is a big reason why he's the absolute ruler of the 5 great dynasties. The emperor realized he hadn't been strict enough in teaching his younger brother. He should have spent more time guiding Ryan. Jan told his little brother he should be grateful he was going easy on him. But now, Sir Ryan Furza has to go to the Meggerino estate and personally deliver the news of the divorce. It's a 2-week ride to Shumarino, but the emperor still sent the captain of the palace guard there. So, after 2 weeks, Ryan arrived at the Meggerino estate and gave the Viscount's family all the details. The lady was furious, but the blonde guy was just happy to have done his part. His older brother's way too soft when it comes to Isaac Meggerino. When that former nobody had the nerve to refuse the emperor's offer to command the army, Ian gave him a title and land. Ryan thought he'd have to lean on them, using that fact, but it doesn't look like it'll be necessary. It's just some backwater estate with an old retired knight and his ill-mannered daughter. That's why the blonde was sure he had nothing to worry about. Sir Ryan Furza is the ruler's only brother, and he specifically gave up the noble life to become the emperor's sword. But he didn't know yet that the ill-mannered girl from the backwater estate was capable of causing such a ruckus in the empire. Going back a bit, a subordinate asked Secretary Luke what they should do with the young man named Sasha Lin. They need to figure this out ASAP, right? The boss ordered them to set everything up to look as organic as possible. An interesting thought popped into Luke's head, and he decided to ask how things were going with that hybrid horse. The owner said the guest was leaving tomorrow, and only asked that the horse be given water, even though hybrids eat meat. And that's the fact Luke decided to take advantage of. Now, back in the present, Cletia was totally lost as to what the heck was going on. Shukram had completely trashed the trading stall. A bunch of onlookers were shocked that a regular horse had caused such a mess and was now eating meat. The beast froze when the lady approached from behind and coldly called him by name. Barely managing to hide her rising fury, Cletia demanded an explanation for what was happening. Shukrim, panicking, explained to his mistress that it was all a misunderstanding, that he was suddenly overcome by a terrible hunger. The main character started snatching the meat away from him, saying, "Are you trying to get yourself killed?" The beast yanked the meat, begging to enjoy at least this last delicious bite. Thing is, they both overestimated their strength, and the meat went flying. And then, hilariously, it landed smack dab on some dude's face. Turns out it was Hans, the owner of Tom's Meats. He collapsed to his knees, realizing his career was toast. And now, Secretary Luke could make his next move. Clearing his throat, he asked the kid if he happened to own the horse that caused all this mayhem. Clydia forced a nervous smile, knowing she was in deep trouble now. They took her to an office, and the whole time she kept saying how sorry she was. Her horse usually didn't cause problems like this, but something just set him off this time. This whole thing was a total shock to her, especially since Clydia was planning on leaving Muda first thing in the morning. Just like the boss figured, this ain't your average tourist. Anyone else would be on their knees, begging for forgiveness by now. That appetite-boosting water was even more effective than Secretary Luke imagined. Clydia figured the guy was about to ask for compensation, since that stall probably belonged to him. Luke explained that they were at Tom Holding's headquarters, and their guy ran the stall. The main character had heard of that company, so this is gonna go way smoother than she thought. Even though Clydia was secretly furious at Shukrim for making a mess in the big shot store, Luke, on the other hand, was surprised the dude was staying so calm, even after hearing the name Tom. Since the damage was pretty serious, he wasn't authorized to deal with it, so he made a quick exit. Khaleesi was curious how much the shop owner would try to squeeze out of her. She froze when a guy walked into the room and said hello. Tom got word that the kid's horse caused a bit of a ruckus on his property. The main character's jaw just about hit the floor. This dude had dark hair and red eyes, and was rocking a jet black suit that fit him like a glove. Tom was stunned when the guest asked if he was the Duke of the North. The dark-haired guy had no clue how he knew that. Even though he came from nothing, Tom's now sitting on more cash than a lot of fancy nobles. But that's not who he really is. The hero's real name is Eugene Wiener de Servan. He's the last of the imperial bloodline, and the leader of the rebels trying to bring their empire back from the dead. He used to be a duke, ruling over huge territories up north. The kid in front of him looks more like a girl, which probably means she's trying to hide everything, even her gender. The way she's holding that cup, she's definitely from some noble family. But more importantly, she knows about Eugene's real background. So, our hero asks her to clarify what she meant by Duke of the North. Right now, depending on her answer, Eugene's gonna decide whether to off this sassy broad right here or not. Cleacha had no idea her life hung on her reply, as Ryukin stared her down. Laughing, the girl said it was a mistake. Ryukin perfectly embodies the Northern Duke, so it's easy to mix them up. And that's why this unfortunate slip-up happened. Cleacha had no intention of offending her gracious host, but Tom was glued to her, not buying a single word. He saw right through her clumsy attempts to change the subject. Clydia asked how much it would take to make this whole misunderstanding go away. Ryukin finally looked away from the girl's face, pausing dramatically as he gathered his thoughts and figured out his next move. He pulled out a small, elegant abacus and suggested they calculate the damage. Okay, let's add up the repair costs, the ruined merchandise, the emotional distress, and the compensation fees for the neighboring merchants. That comes to a grand total of 50,000 coins. The guy couldn't resist a snarky comment and offered a 10% discount. He was practically glowing with smug satisfaction. Seeing that, Clytia was so stunned, she just stood there with her jaw hanging open. Forcing a nervous laugh, the girl acted like nothing was wrong, and she was ready to settle her debts. But on the inside, she was totally freaking out. Thing is, Muda's a trade hub near the capital, and prices there are insane. But there's still a way out, since Dad set up a trust fund in her name that she can tap into. She smirked at that ridiculous idea, but the kicker is, he'll get a notification when the money's withdrawn and come running to this town to deal with his bratty daughter's mess. Meanwhile, Tom's smile faded a little. He didn't expect his completely outrageous demands to be met. He was dead certain she was a rich noblewoman traveling incognito, but he couldn't figure out why she was playing dumb. Clytia put on a confused look, then said she didn't have that kind of cash on her. Then the girl said she needed to withdraw the sum from her account at the Imperial Bank, and then she'd pay back the debt. The young guy thought about it. There's no suitable bank in Muta, so she'd have to go to the capital, but she'd have to leave collateral in the form of her hybrid horse. The news hit Clisha like a ton of bricks. She had no idea how it got out. Then it clicked. Shukrim smashed through a bunch of buildings and busted into a butcher shop, chowing down on meat in front of everyone. And now she was kicking herself big time. Trying to keep it together, she agreed to leave the horse. But how was she supposed to get to the capital then? Tom, grinning like a Cheshire cat, replied that he had some business in the capital and offered to travel there together. After Clisha left, the secretary asked if his master was serious about going to the capital with this odd girl. Is the risk really worth it? Even if there's been no word from the emperor lately, this could be a setup. The young man paused, then asked a question of his own. What's the best way to figure someone out? And he answered himself. It's simple. You talk to them a lot, and eventually they'll spill their guts. If you talk long enough, their whole game becomes clear, and the trip to the capital will take all day tomorrow. During their long trip, the young man will uncover all the secrets of this strange girl. Sitting on the plush sofas, the two young people gazed out the window at the passing scenery, sharing their thoughts. But the brunette was playing the innocent victim, and Clydia felt super awkward because she felt guilty. Deciding to lighten the mood a little, the girl decided to give the young man a compliment. Girding herself, Clydia declared that she was right, and that he looked exactly like the Northern Duke. Tom became wary, wondering if the girl was testing him or dropping some hints. So the young man stayed silent and just frowned, staring intently at Clytia's face, seeing that this girl was flustered. Continuing the conversation, she asked if the gentleman knew about the great Duke of the North, to which Tom replied in the negative. Feigning enthusiasm, the girl said that since her companion wasn't aware, she would tell him about the Duke of the North. They have a whole day ahead of them, so they shouldn't miss such a great opportunity to learn something new. The girl was totally relaxed and wouldn't shut up, and the dude was about to lose his mind from all the endless stories. And Clydia, having found someone to talk to, couldn't stop. At that moment, she was laying another brain teaser on him. The young guy frowned. He didn't like the implication of the question, which seemed way too loaded. Pretty much all the questions revolved around taking care of people who deserved it, if you get my drift. Finally, Tom snapped. Did someone really have to get hurt? Couldn't they solve anything without resorting to that? The next question froze him in his tracks. The girl asked him, what was more important to him? The life of his girl or loyalty to the crown? He yelled that his loyalty to the emperor was the most important thing to him, period. But Clytia got pissed in response. She pointed a finger at him and yelled back that Tom wasn't anything like the Duke of the North. Listening to her go on and on about why he couldn't possibly be that noble guy, Tom breathed a sigh of relief. The girl kept going, saying the Duke had to be strong, mysterious, and have a ton of other awesome qualities. She just wouldn't quit, ending her rant with a shout about how the Duke of the North was, like, amazing in bed. She practically jumped the poor dude. Tom tried to change the subject, but Clisha wasn't having it. She wouldn't let him off the hook and made him keep listening. He wasn't going to find a more informed expert on this stuff, so she was going to recap every romance novel she'd ever read. The guy felt like he was about to lose his mind. The next morning, the carriage arrived in Sigrid, the imperial capital. Staring in awe at the towering buildings outside the window, Clisha felt like a tiny, insignificant bug. She'd read so much about the capital's splendor, but she never expected it to be this breathtaking. Spotting a good place, she asked the guy to drop her off right there so she could head to the bank. The driver stopped the carriage in the middle of the busy street. Tom was stoked to finally ditch that chatty passenger. Then a thought struck him. He reached out, saying he's always happy to help a lady as charming as her. Realizing her cover was blown, the girl froze. She couldn't take her eyes off this handsome dude, like she was seeing him for the first time. Stepping out of the carriage, Clisha declared he'd failed the gentleman test. Despite his best efforts, her companion couldn't call himself a Northern Duke. He needed to seriously work on his manners. And only then would she consider letting him kidnap her. Then the girl started saying goodbye, like it was the end of the world. Just then, his secretary, who'd been riding in another carriage, walked up, and together they silently watched Clisha leave. The secretary noticed how dramatically the strange girl had said goodbye to his lord, and that she'd called him a duke. The secretary was totally losing it, and even suggested sending a spy after the girl. But Tom refused, figuring it was better to just leave things alone, nothing to sweat about. Ever since Eugene Ryukin's homeland was destroyed, he's been obsessed with getting revenge on the Fursa Empire. And now, it looks like the last member of that ancient family has just plain fallen in love. That's why he doesn't want anything bad to happen to Clytia. The young man climbed into the carriage and leaned back against the soft cushions with a sigh of relief. The whole ride, He felt like he was about to lose his mind. The number of romance novels that girls read is insane. She wouldn't shut up, day or night, and just unloaded all her knowledge about the Duke of the North. This weird chick, a total fangirl for the Duke of the North, is completely obsessed with him. Catching himself still thinking about her even now, Tom smacked himself on the forehead as hard as he could. Enough with the crazy thoughts, or he'll start believing she's a witch who's put some kind of spell on him. That thought just froze Eugene in his tracks. Stepping outside, Klitschko stretched, loving the feeling. Weird, she didn't even notice when this dude started calling her she. Doesn't even matter though, she's not here to hook up. She came to the temple. Seeing no one was opening up, she announced, "Clitia Megerino demands an audience with the high priest." Still, the only response was silence. Not knowing what else to do, the girl started banging on the huge gates as hard as she could, yelling to get the priest's attention. Finally, a lock clicked. A section opened, and a teenage priest poked his head out. Adjusting her cap, Klitschko declared she wasn't some bum, and she was here for a totally different reason. Standing up straight, she gave her name and demanded again to see the high priest about something super important. He sized her up, didn't say a word, just pointed towards the exit. Knowing she wasn't getting anywhere, Klitschko trudged off. She didn't see the high priest peek out from the gate and quietly ask the boy if their little trick had worked. The young priest said everything was fine this time, but he wasn't sure he could turn her down if she came back again. The boy couldn't hold back and asked why the high priest didn't want to see her. The man just smiled. Meanwhile, Klitschko was running down the street when she suddenly felt her stomach twisting with hunger. The feeling was so intense that she stopped and decided to grab some food after she dealt with the bank. Lost in thought, Klitschko approached the fancy door and was shocked to see the bank was already closed and wouldn't open for 2 days. She definitely wasn't expecting that. Seriously, what kind of moron designs a bank that's closed on weekends? But the real kicker is she's completely broke now. Just then, she remembered they were giving out free food over at the building on the main square. She slowly made her way there, only to find out they were done for the day and she'd have to come back tomorrow. Unbelievable, even here she was only 15 minutes late. Plopping down right on the sidewalk next to the beggars and drifters, the girl wondered what kind of mess she'd gotten herself into with her own dumb decisions. Maybe she shouldn't have been so foolishly generous and handed over all her cash to those lowlifes. Klitschko felt like a total idiot. Now she's alone in a huge, unfamiliar city, without a single coin to her name, and not even her trusty shukram to protect her. And to top it all off, she has to survive like this for 2 whole days with no money, no food, and no help. Oh well, what can you do? At least she still has her sword, but the girl couldn't find her trusty blade. This sent Klitschko into a total panic. Right then, Tom was holding a package a passenger had forgotten, checking it out. The guy was surprised to find he was holding a sword with a comfortable, worn-down handle. And Klitschko was just boiling with rage. For some reason, the girl decided this smug, pretty boy, who looked like some northern duke, had stolen the sword. Meanwhile, back at the Imperial Palace, a real drama was unfolding. The Emperor's advisor was arguing with His Majesty. He was saying he wasn't happy with the Emperor, wanting to wander around the city in plain clothes to see how his people lived. Advisor Miri explained it wasn't just dangerous, but it would cause total chaos if people recognized the Emperor. And even if he changed into simple clothes, it wouldn't matter. The Emperor's looks are too easily recognizable. Not many people have such bright, fair hair and striking eyes. That's why Miri's totally against sneaking out and insists you travel around town with a security detail. But when the Emperor got an idea in his head, he was stubborn as hell and would do anything to get his way. Realizing he couldn't talk the boss out of it, Miri just closed his eyes in defeat and shut up, accepting the inevitable. That's when Clarencia Logan, one of the commanders of the Palace Guard, chimed in. Understanding His Majesty's predicament, she offered him some special pills that could solve the problem. They have this unique property that changes your hair color for about a day, but you can't use any magic or the effect wears off. Impatient, the Emperor swallowed a pill and was amazed to see his hair turn a light brown color in the mirror. Now he could walk around the city freely without worrying about being recognized. Not wanting to wait any longer, His Majesty hopped nimbly onto the windowsill and, grinning at his advisor, jumped down. The maid who saw this crazy stunt gasped. She was terrified the Emperor would break something jumping from that height, but Advisor Miri and Clarencia were chill. Nothing bad could happen to a mage with that kind of power. Miri wondered where those magic pills came from, and Clarencia said they were her own personal invention. It had been a solid 10 years since the war ended, and you wouldn't even know it looking at the imperial capital. Walking down the street, the emperor admired how Furza was blooming and growing. But the poverty problem? Still a total mess. The emperor thought hard. Were there really that many people starving in the city that they still couldn't fix it? Remembering how much effort he'd spent fighting corruption, the emperor groaned in frustration, so he didn't immediately hear someone calling him, and only noticed when the stranger tapped his shoulder. The emperor spun around quick. Next to him was a young guy in a cap, wearing a simple travel outfit. That was Clicia. She just wanted to let us know the building's closed today, so no free food handout. But they're open on weekends, so if you can wait till tomorrow, you can get a decent meal. The emperor smirked at that. His experienced eyes weren't fooled by the clumsy disguise. He knew right away it was a woman dressed as a man. But get this, he could sense that this stranger possessed a fire rune. So now, the wielder of this super rare gift is standing before him dressed like a bum? The emperor had to find out what was up. Without missing a beat, the guy asks Clicia if she wants to work for him, which totally throws her for a loop. It's only then that she realizes this dude isn't some street rat, but a seriously handsome and charismatic young guy. But the weirdest thing is, she's got this nagging feeling she's seen him before, like she knows him really well. And what's more, Clicia felt like she was really drawn to this guy. She reminded herself that her type was dark-haired dukes with killer red eyes. Blonde hair and green eyes? That's side character material. Don't go falling for just anyone. Seeing the girl's hesitation, the emperor said he wouldn't ask for anything crazy, but he could hook her up with some good eats. That cleared up all of Clicia's doubts. She gave a goofy bow and said she'd gladly take the job. As long as there's meat on the menu, she'll be a model employee. The two shook hands. The emperor introduced himself as Ray Vogue, private investigator, and Clicia called herself Sasha Lin. Committed to the role, the emperor pointed to a guy walking down the sidewalk with a big briefcase. We think he's been messing around on his wife, so Clicia needs to tail him and get proof of the dirty deed. The girl took off after the stranger, ready to expose this lowlife for what he is. She followed him to some old building and set up a stakeout, hiding around the corner. Clicia hissed at him to keep it down, or they'd blow their cover for sure. The emperor kept an eye on his new acquaintance, surprised to find how much he actually liked this girl. Just then, the guy stopped dead, clutched his briefcase, and started looking around real nervous. It was clear he'd spotted someone tailing him. Without hesitation, the girl yelled at the top of her lungs, demanding that the low-down cheat stop right there, and took off after him. The man panicked and bolted, but the street was a dead end, forcing him to stop. But that wasn't the end of it. The stranger became enveloped in a greenish glow and made an insane leap over the wall. The emperor couldn't believe what he was seeing. Caught off guard, the young man stumbled, barely keeping his balance, but Clicia managed to reach out and grab him around the waist. Then, the girl scooped him up in her arms and made an incredible jump, launching herself off the pavement. She soared high into the air, still holding the young man tight, and cleared the wall after the stranger. All those acrobatic flips ended with one hell of a landing. It wasn't until after he landed that the emperor realized what had happened, and he felt something close to fear. Not knowing what to say, the young man stammered out his thanks and gave his unexpected employee a compliment. The emperor's attention shifted to the fleeing stranger. Everything suggested he was someone important. Seeing his pursuers, the man bolted through an open door. There was no way they could let him get away. Clicia screamed that she understood. He was meeting his mistress here and then getting up to no good with her. Nailed to the door was a sign with a picture of 4 sevens. And then it hit the emperor. 4 bronze sevens meant he was near the famous Lucky Box. That was the name for an underground auction that sold all kinds of illicit goods. This is a super secret club for guys who are into forbidden stuff. You can buy practically anything here. This stranger with a briefcase bursts into the auction room, looking totally beat and like he's running from someone. One of the sharply dressed guys asks him what the big rush is, and if there's any reason to be concerned. The stranger grabs his briefcase and slams it down on the table. He catches his breath and lets out a loud laugh, saying it's a total jackpot because he got his hands on a way to take down the emperor. At that moment, Clicia's just standing there, confused, as her boss tells her to stop following him. The emperor knew he might need a fire mage, but didn't want to drag anyone else into this mess. He turns around and demands Clicia forget what she saw and head back to the square. The girl argues that if it's so dangerous, he definitely shouldn't go alone. Seriously, she'd rather go alone. A private eye might not be ready for whatever's waiting there. The emperor just smiled at that, then burst out laughing, which totally confused Klitschia. The guy ruffled her hair and promised they'd meet up soon, and he'd treat her to a killer lunch. With that, the emperor bolted. Clydia was stunned by how fast things were moving, but her employer's actions seemed a little reckless. The underground auction was held in a massive hall, like a theater. A sharply dressed host with a mic took the stage and cheerfully greeted the distinguished crowd. Meanwhile, the emperor found a spot in the aisle near a balcony and watched the scene unfold from above. The host announced the first lots of the night, a hybrid horse called Windrush, and a slave from the mystical desert lands. And to top it all off, they announced a lot with the cryptic name Downfall of the Empire, which turned out to be a sealed envelope. It was like a lightning bolt hit the emperor. He could feel the importance radiating from that envelope. Still, things were working out surprisingly well, considering he'd managed to infiltrate the inner circle of this shady organization. Night had completely fallen on the city as Klitschia walked down the street. She was just about convinced she was going to have a decent meal tonight, and then bam! Dreams crushed. Recent events flashed through her mind, and she wondered, was that guy just a total pushover, or am I getting stronger? Actually, her new acquaintance is surprisingly interesting, even if he can't use magical runes. Suddenly, she jumped. What if he needs help right now? He can't exactly defend himself against those lowlifes. For a moment, she kept walking, but then she spun around and took off running back the way she came. Meanwhile, the emperor was watching the auction unfold. The announcer declared that the unique horse had been sold for 500,000 coins. These guys scream underworld. Smart move would be calling the palace guard, not playing hero solo. The emperor just noticed his new acquaintance. The one disguised as a young man was right beside him. Turning to her, the young man asked sternly what she was doing there. Klitschia smirked, playing the confident guy. She'd already greased some palms with the guards and handled things her way. Leaning over the railing, the girl looked down in amazement at the glittering crowd below. The auction continued on stage. The host introduced the next lot, a slave named Santir from the Mystic Lands. Klitschia was shocked to hear the young man's starting price was a whopping 100,000 coins. Deciding they needed to get out of there, the emperor tried to pull the headstrong girl away. Watching the stage, Klitschia flew into a rage. Was this what the Empire's warriors fought for? This kind of messed up garbage? A split second later, she was climbing onto the railing, ready to jump down. Turning around, Klitschia looked at her acquaintance, begging him to back her up and arrest all these scumbags. The emperor, stunned by her naivete, shook his head and told her to cool it and think things through. But Klitschia was beyond stopping. She shoved off with all her might, leaped forward, and landed gracefully on the stage. Standing up tall, Klitschia screamed, calling everyone gathered there disgusting slavers. Seeing the guards rushing to help, the host got brave and started apologizing to the guests, promising to smooth over this misunderstanding. Klitschia darted to the young man kneeling on the ground and untied his hands, promising to save him if he just listened to her. However, judging by his reaction, the young man didn't want to be saved. He hissed angrily at the girl, demanding she stay out of it. Ignoring the kid, Klitschia freed him and then whacked him on the back of the head. Then she scooped him up in her arms and headed for the exit. The emperor was in complete shock at what his new acquaintance was doing. Spotting the guards rushing towards her, Klitschia spun around to face them, not afraid of a fight in the slightest. The cocky guys didn't expect any resistance, and they definitely weren't expecting a fire mage here. A second later, a raging inferno erupted inside the abandoned building on the edge of town, threatening to destroy everything. Climbing to the top of a high tower, Klitschia realized she might have gone a little overboard. Her skills were clearly rusty. Suddenly, she felt the kid she'd rescued, the one she was carrying on her shoulder, start to squirm like crazy. He immediately demanded to be put down, right now. The main character gently set the kid on his feet, and his face instantly twisted into an expression of anger and intense annoyance. The little brat yelled at the heroes, asking how they dared interfere with his important business, and that he'd never forgive them for it. Klitschia gently stroked the kid's head, and he immediately went silent, calmed by her touch. With a wide, genuine smile, she explained to the kid that in this kind of situation, he should just say thank you instead of pointing fingers. So, a myrrh, huh? The blonde guy suddenly says, catching Klitschia totally off guard and making the kid freeze up. A sly but satisfied smile creeps across the emperor's face. He gets it now. This kid's people have been watching them for a while. No need to hide anymore. Klitschya's jaw drops when these mysterious figures in dark cloaks just appear on the high tower. They snatch the kid And he didn't even put up a fight, just went with them. The main character's clueless about who they are, but the detective just lets them walk away. The cloaked figure gives a quick nod, not saying a single word. And then, just as suddenly as they showed up, these mysterious people vanished. Cletia, confused, asks who those people were, who the kid is, and what mirror even means. Ian patiently explains that a mirror is another type of magic, kinda like runes, but with a few differences. The Emperor decided he needed to deal with this new problem, like yesterday. He told the woman to lay low for a while. The auction house guys might be hunting her. Cletia wanted to tell the detective she'd be fine, but he was already gone. The dude just bolted and didn't even say goodbye. But Cletia wasn't too worried. That scrawny detective seemed like he could handle himself. Suddenly, the smart young woman remembered something super important. That guy promised to treat her, but then he ditched her and didn't even feed her. The subordinates knelt before Lord Seth and told him that was pretty damn risky. His Holiness's operation was way too dangerous. If the Sultan finds out, he'll blow a gasket. But if those two knuckleheads hadn't shown up, everything would have gone according to plan. The servants told the master that the guy with the bright brown hair is actually the Emperor of the Fursa Empire. They haven't figured out how or why the Emperor was hiding under a different identity yet, but his energy gave him away completely. It was one of a kind. That's why Master Seta found his aura familiar. Now that even the Emperor knows what's up, we need to head back immediately. Suddenly, the hero realized something incredibly important. Thinking back to those moments, he was totally distracted by something else and didn't even notice something crucial. How his awful, agonizing pain, the one tearing apart his soul, suddenly and completely quieted down. Unfortunately, his subordinates couldn't figure out who the second person was. They only found out it was a woman. Then Master Seta slowly reached for the gleaming pendant around his neck. Right now, the measure feels like it's completely stabilized. His most loyal guys respectfully told His Holiness they had to haul ass like yesterday. The hero gave a quick nod and instantly juiced up a powerful ancient amulet. Boom! He magically aged into a full-grown dude and wondered to himself how soon he'd see that girl, Sasha, again. A deafening thunderclap ripped through the air, and a flash of lightning lit up the Emperor's tight, sinister grin. He asked the useless bunch of morons, way too sweetly, what they did all day if they couldn't even sniff out an auction. That impatient psycho couldn't even wait for dawn. The Emperor hauled all his officials out of bed in the middle of the night. Ian didn't want excuses. He told the officials to look after the city, and they were just running it into the ground. One of the terrified flunkies blurted out that it wasn't what it looked like at all. Wise Sir Ryan told them, real smooth, that fish can't thrive in water that's too clean, like totally sterile. He declared that as long as the officials kept an eye on the underworld, no major problems would pop up. So it was unanimously decided to leave them alone, to let things be. The Emperor, barely holding back his fury, demanded to know where Ryan was. As the valiant captain of the guard, he's probably already at the scene, sorting things out. Ryan was actually a little surprised by the sheer chaotic mess that had been made. One of the knights reported to the captain that they'd almost cleared all the debris, and luckily, no civilians were hurt. Suddenly, on the dark, damp ground, the blonde clearly spotted a strange, sealed envelope. The knight reported clearly that they had already apprehended all the prime suspects. Regarding the thing that doomed the Empire, it wasn't sold. After carefully listening to the report, Ryan cautiously opened the envelope. A faint, enigmatic smile appeared on his face, and he immediately told the knights that everything was fine, and they could forget about the main objective. He cleverly spread carefully crafted rumors in various places. Anyone with a nose for it and the cash has definitely heard them. The ancient Servan Empire was wiped out ages ago, but their sneaky descendants weren't completely destroyed and are now crawling all over Furza. After 10 long years of being totally forgotten, they're finally ready to unleash their wicked, terrible revenge plot. Rain completely burned that mysterious envelope, along with the secret document that was inside. He suddenly got super curious about what kind of face his older brother would make when he finally figured everything out. At that very moment, in Tom Riken's secret office in the capital city, Luke reported that Xena's people were making a serious move. They're planning to strike directly at the Emperor himself, Eugene asked, completely pissed off. Why the heck his people didn't check with him first? According to the elders, they're not happy with the boss's plan because the preparations are taking way too long. Looks like they've got some kind of ace up their sleeve, and now they're itching to play it and take out the Emperor. Eugene cursed a blue streak and told Xena to go straight to heck. He's not about to keep idiots around who just get in the way. Unveiling the secretly hidden map from behind the curtain, the Duke of the North confidently declared his plan was flawless. The nobles and subjects of the Servan Empire, those who survived the war with Fursa, formed a secret organization called Xena. Then they spread their roots across the entire continent, sinking their teeth and claws everywhere, all to one day restore their empire's former glory. Eugene could understand their impatience. After all, it had been many years since the war. But these people don't realize they only survived because they didn't face Ian Furza himself. They can't even imagine what that ruthless bastard is capable of. Letting out a heavy sigh, Eugene agreed to take a look at his subordinate's so-called trump card. Luke was surprised that his lord wanted to go out in person. The Duke of the North looked intently at his secretary and asked if they'd be moving out tomorrow night. The next morning rolled around, and our girl was already starving. The supplies she managed to scrounge up vanished in a heartbeat, gone the second she looked away. Like Clydia was told, even the homeless spots are all taken, and she can't just crash wherever she wants. She didn't expect the capital to be such a dog-eat-dog kind of town. It's all because of those two jerks, first the blasted emperor with his marriage stuff, and now that low-down detective. Suddenly, someone gently poked Clydia on the shoulder. The young woman turned her surprised gaze to a kid. Out of nowhere, the little guy called Clydia bro, and asked if he was new around here. Hesitantly, she nodded, and the kind-hearted kid offered her a whole loaf of bread. A bright, happy smile lit up his face. Clydia took the food and asked the kid, looking confused, "What about him?" The boy explained he got the bread for free at the cafeteria and could get more later. Clydia took a bite and changed her mind about the capital, thinking it was awesome. Finishing her meal, she wondered why there were so many homeless people if it was such a rich city. The boy asked his little brother, surprised, "You don't know? Homeless people and the poor flock here on purpose from all over. Since the emperor himself is responsible for the capital's well-being, it's way easier to get help and support here. He's actually from Shumarin, lived in a small village nearby. But his parents ditched him, and he barely made it to the capital." The boy added excitedly that nobody takes care of the people like His Majesty the Emperor. Those words caught the main character off guard. So this kid was from Shumarin, just like our main character, born in the same freaking place. Only now did Clydia realize that her hometown also has a lot of people struggling, and it bummed her out. The boy happily replied that His Majesty would soon put an end to all the poverty. Suddenly, someone chucked a sandwich at the kid. The main character froze, and the kid shut his mouth. The guy asked his buddy why he was throwing food around, and the jerk replied he was just feeding a homeless person. The aristocrat didn't understand where all these rats kept crawling out from, desperately looking for food among the people. What's the emperor even thinking? He could have cleaned up this city from all the riffraff a long time ago and made life better. The guy went silent and shifted his gaze to the person sitting next to the kid. The main character was burning holes into the jerk with her eyes. The rich guy sneered at the poor dude, asking what he was staring at and why he was grinning like he was about to jump him. He got what was coming to him real quick. The main girl beat him so bad, he didn't even know what hit him. Clydia got arrested, and even at the station, the jerk was still yelling about how dare she touch him, the son of some big shot. The heroine realized the rules in this city were tight. The guards showed up instantly, the second she landed a punch. Honestly, Clydia could have gotten out of that situation easy, just by using a fire rune and showing off her power. But the girl had completely different plans. Instead of running, she just collapsed on the ground, letting the knights arrest her without a fight. That totally confused the guards, because they weren't expecting that kind of reaction from someone they just caught. Clydia couldn't take it anymore. She needed some decent food, because she was starving and couldn't even focus. The guard officer angrily asked the young prisoner, Clydia in disguise, if she was even listening to him. The dude she just wailed on is the big shot official's youngest son, and street fighting's a no-go. The officer told the perp to spill it. Name, age, where she's from, and what brings her to the capital. Clydia decided to chill and just lay out the whole truth about herself. She revealed she's actually the daughter of Viscount Mejerino, and came here to meet the emperor. The guard didn't buy it, and demanded to see some ID. With a big grin, she said she lost it in the scuffle and couldn't produce it for the cops. So yeah, she wound up behind bars pretty quick. Defendant convicted of aggravated assault, showing signs of issues, sentence is 3 months. Clydia thought this was totally bogus when her cellmate suddenly asked if this was her first time inside. The girl shouted that she was framed and totally innocent, no matter how it looked. Okay, so she clocked some idiot once, but he totally had it coming, right? He got what he deserved. Her cellmate clapped a hand on her shoulder, like he understood, and said that's what all the inmates say. Outside, it was pitch black, but the stars were blazing in the sky. The barred doors creaked open, and the prisoners started filing out of their cells. They threw on dark cloaks, slipped out of their cells, and geared up to put their plan to off the emperor into action. Xena's silver assassins managed to knock out the guards with some special dust. The right dose of that forest mushroom powder works like a charm, and these guys happened to bring just the right amount. The moon's way brighter than usual tonight, so they were hoping it wouldn't screw up their cover and blow their whole operation. But the guy who was talking to Klitschko earlier thought it was the perfect night to take out the emperor. While the prisoners were whispering to each other, our main girl was just lying on the cold floor of her cell. Everyone was sure the girl had also passed out and couldn't hear a thing. But as soon as it got quiet and everyone left, Klitschko propped herself up on her elbows and looked around. She stretched energetically and quietly wondered why sleeping potions were all the rage these days. Klitschko was tired of waiting for these people to leave and clear her path to freedom. The girl figured it was best to play possum and not attract attention with all these shady characters around. But after overhearing their plans to take out the emperor, she decided to find the officer on duty and spill the beans. So, she quickly slipped out of the cell and headed for the exit. Once outside, Klitschko started scanning her surroundings for any possible threats or guards. A look of confusion immediately spread across his face. Even though this is inside the palace, why isn't there a single guard on duty anywhere? Seriously, how irresponsible can the knights be? They're supposed to be guarding the palace from threats. On the ground, the main character spotted a small scrap of fabric and picked it up, curious. Then, she tied her hair up in a high ponytail, realizing she was going to have to clean up someone else's mess and save the day. Again. A happy smile spread across Ryan's face when he spotted his older brother, and he called out to him. The emperor, who was walking ahead, turned around. Hearing the familiar voice of his younger brother, Ian immediately rushed toward the little punk he'd finally found, after searching forever, and wound up to punch him. Ryan somehow managed to stop his older brother and told him not to get so worked up over minor disagreements, because right now, there's something way more important and serious than their squabbles. That's why His Majesty needs to head out to the garden immediately. The captain of the guard explained to the older brother that there was a little surprise waiting for him there, something he'd been working hard on. Ian figured his little bro was up to no good again, but Ryan just asked him to cut him some slack for once. The Knight Commander promised the Emperor he wouldn't be disappointed. Under the cover of night, the Xena members moved quickly through the Imperial Castle grounds, trying not to draw any attention. Suddenly, one of the guys got a bad feeling and told the leader something was off. This place should be crawling with guards, but we waltzed right in and haven't seen a soul. The leader just said they work for Xena, and that should give them all the confidence they need to pull this off. The elders definitely made sure nothing would mess with their operation, that everything would go according to plan. Suddenly, the guy froze, his eyes widening in shock. They finally spotted their main target, so close they could almost reach out and touch it. The Emperor stepped out into the garden, still clueless about the surprise his little brother had cooked up for him. What was he even supposed to be seeing? Everything looked way too calm. Suddenly, dudes in dark cloaks swarmed the king from every direction. A smile crept across the Emperor's face, and he muttered that Ryan was a real piece of work as soon as he figured out his sneaky scheme. That little punk actually dared to use the Emperor as bait for his dirty business. A member of Xena activated a crystal and hurled it at His Majesty with the accuracy of a pro knife thrower. A magic circle instantly locked down the Emperor's body, neutralizing him in seconds and leaving him helpless. There was no doubt about it. His Majesty Ian Furza had walked right into a trap. He was now enveloped in magic-suppressing tech, which had cost Xena a fortune and a ton of effort. The magic of the Furza Knights is seriously impressive, but because they rely entirely on runes, they can be easily suppressed with simple methods. In the end, the Emperor himself fell victim to such a simple trick, carefully orchestrated by his enemies. Guess these lowlifes didn't get the memo. Rune Knights don't need outside mana sources. They're a total waste of time. Plus, they're easy to smash. All you gotta do is hit them hard enough. But the Xena guys figured the Emperor was full of it, and they all jumped him at once, ready to take him down right then and there. Yan just grinned at the thugs and asked if they seriously thought that was going to be enough to beat him. Like a ghost, Eugene slipped into the massive, heavily guarded grounds of the Emperor's palace, totally undetected. That was when Furza crushed Servan for good, becoming the undisputed top dog of the entire continent of Ashi. The Xena organization inherited the fallen empire's mission, and their fingers were in practically every pie. Bribery, black markets, gambling. They weren't too good for anything if it meant raking in cash, and they secretly trained top-tier assassins. But after 10 years of waiting for nothing, their leaders started turning into impatient old geezers losing their grip. Even after all this time, Xena's still the main engine driving the never-ending grudge over that old defeat. Eugene, moving with extreme caution, slipped behind one of the thickest trees in the garden, completely unnoticed. In his head, he didn't pull any punches, calling all his high-ranking elders complete morons. The Emperor's own brother, Ryan Furza, was considered a lazy, good-for-nothing traitor who just got lucky with his family. But those assumptions were dead wrong, because you'd be hard-pressed to find someone more loyal to Ian Furza than his own brother. The powerful Emperor effortlessly attacked all the approaching criminals at once, showing off his strength. And then, he easily shattered the complex spell that was supposedly meant to contain his incredible power in some way. Once the criminals were no longer able to attack, His Majesty immediately stopped using his abilities on them. Ian was totally baffled, wondering if that was all these nobodies had planned. And just then, his loyal knights rushed to his side. Clarencia told the Emperor that the entire palace guard had been suddenly gathered and ordered to wait inside. And then the alarm went off. The blonde calmly announced that nothing serious had happened. His younger brother just decided to give him a rather unique gift. The Emperor didn't off anyone. Instead, he flat out ordered his guards to round up all the prisoners. Pronto. It blew Miri's mind that the gorgeous garden was still perfectly intact. Not even a scratch on it. With a touch of longing, Ian said his late mother had been super fond of this beautiful spot. Anywhere else, it'd be total wreckage. But since the Emperor's mother cherished the garden, Ian deliberately preserved it. Still, even for the most skilled and powerful masters, controlling that much raw energy with such precision was a killer. It was a real surgical feat, something only one guy in the whole empire could pull off. After everything that went down, the mighty Emperor turned to his loyal Clarencia, calm but firm. With a suspiciously sweet, but definitely not friendly smile, Ian asked her to bring his younger brother, Ryan, to him, like yesterday. Without hesitation, she promised to carry out His Majesty's order immediately and without question, wasting no time. Miri asked Clarencia where to find the Knights Commander, but she had absolutely no clue. Bet Ryan's already playing hide-and-seek with the Emperor again, trying to dodge him. The more the Knight Commander thought about his gift, the more he was patting himself on the back for being so damn clever. He flushed out all of Xena's little rats so easily, practically served them up to his brother on a silver platter. But after all that went down, his older brother's probably seeing red right now. Suddenly, the blonde turned and spotted a young girl with striking crimson hair tearing through the garden. He quickly caught up to the unexpected runaway and asked who the heck she was. He was seriously taken aback by how chill this young lady was acting. No panic at all. Ryan quickly pointed out the escape route to the girl and the direction where she'd definitely get caught. Clydia anxiously asked what was going on in the palace, but the Knight Commander wasn't giving up any answers. The girl calmly said that all she needed to know right now was that the Emperor was all right. Ryan didn't get why this stranger was so interested. Clydia proudly declared that unwavering devotion to His Majesty was the sacred duty of every citizen in this great empire. The strange girl's words, so full of honest conviction, really hit Ryan hard. Before he could even finish saying the Emperor was totally fine, she thanked him real quick and bolted. Except young Clydia wasn't running to safety. She was heading straight for the freaking Imperial Palace. But Ryan figured nothing too bad could happen because of some random runaway, so he shouldn't sweat it. Still, this mysterious girl was something else. You hardly ever run into someone who actually wields a fire rune. She didn't even flinch meeting the Knight Commander, and her whole vibe was kinda soldier-like, which is weird. But more importantly, both of them had this nagging feeling like they'd definitely met somewhere before. Suddenly, Ryan froze dead in his tracks when a crazy thought hit him, but Clydia decided to ignore that weird thought for now and just kept running. Ryan spun around, his eyes locked on the fleeing stranger disappearing into the distance. Now, taking a closer look, he instantly recognized the young woman as Lady Clydia Megerino. His face instantly went into full-blown shock, mixed with total confusion about what the heck was going on. The guy couldn't figure out for the life of him what this aristocrat was doing alone in a place like this. Clydia now had a golden opportunity to meet the Emperor face to face and ask him a few questions she'd been saving up. Finally, she'd get to see her official husband's face in person, even just once. But as she ran, she didn't run into anyone, which was pretty strange considering the situation. Just as she thought that, Clecia suddenly heard voices in the distance and tensed up. And then, finally, she saw His Majesty, the one she'd been searching for and dreaming of seeing for so long. She skipped right over to her hubby, practically bursting with joy and excitement to see him. Hearing something behind him, Ian spun around, his instincts kicking in fast and hard. Then, with a flick of his wrist, a streak of ice shot out towards Clecia. Miri was completely stunned by the Emperor's sudden move. Ian said it was probably just a rat, but the advisor freaked, saying you can't just throw magic around like that. The floor's wrecked, and now we gotta fix it. So the advisor hoped His Majesty would maybe hold back on the runes sometimes. Actually, Eugene saved the main character from certain doom, shoving her out of the way just in time. Clecia froze, staring at the familiar face. It was none other than Tom Rican. Once the danger passed, the man asked Milady what she was doing there. But what threw him for a loop the most was the young girl's prison uniform, number 3358. Clydia shot to her feet and snapped that she should be the one asking what the heck was going on. What Director Tom was doing here looking so shady, with all this chaos and confusion going down. The fighting stance the girl took made Eugene stop and think. At first, the main character just seemed weird to the guy, but now it was clear she was seriously out of the ordinary, though he probably should have guessed she had abilities from the start, since not just anyone can get their hands on hybrid horses. Clytia was taken aback when Tom suddenly asked how many points he'd earned today for his work and effort. The guy explained that the girl herself had said you could only pass by scoring 90 points. Then, the hero pinned Clytia against the wall, his eyes burning with resolve in that moment. The Duke of the North has to be strong, cold-blooded, mysterious, and gorgeous. That was his life motto. The main character just stared at the guy, confused, and told him he scored a 95. All of a sudden, someone burst out laughing, loud and out of nowhere, and it made them both jump. Ryan apologized for interrupting and explained he was just trying to catch up with them, rushing over. But the talk about being strong and mysterious just cracked him up. While the Knight Commander was going on about it, both of them had already vanished without a trace. Ryan thought it over and figured that girl, number 3358, really was Lady Clecia. She recognized the masked guy, but it didn't seem like they knew each other very well back in the day. And that dude really reminded him of someone with his look and the way he was acting in the moment. 10 years ago, right after the war ended, 16-year-old Ian reported that Eugene had black hair and red eyes. This guy's a descendant of Servan. He's turning 12 this year, which is a crazy coincidence, 'cause Ryan will be too. He swore to Ian he'd find him himself, 'cause it's just a matter of time and the right situation. Snapping out of his thoughts, the commander grinned, saying the kid's really grown up lately. Ryan froze, totally confused, when a familiar voice behind him suddenly asked who he was talking about. Slowly turning around, the blonde hesitantly greeted the person behind him, not expecting to see them. His older brother approached, wearing a suspiciously gentle smile, but his whole body radiated icy power. Ian, with a strange smile, asked Ryan to explain what the heck he was doing in his palace. The younger brother explained that they'd been trying to track down Xena's people all over the Empire, but they always slipped away. But Ryan managed to convince them that he'd betrayed the Empire and met with them in person to get the intel they needed. Then he set everything up so they'd walk right into a trap, feeding them bogus info about his weaknesses and vulnerabilities. While all their elite fighters were out on that op, Ryan snuck into their HQ and totally wrecked the place. Mira was stunned and couldn't hide her surprise when Clarencia suddenly bolted and ran like hell. The Emperor asked his brother with a smile if he was the reason all those hired guns showed up in the garden. The Imperial advisor chased after the valiant Clarencia as the Emperor's magic suddenly started surging, getting stronger and stronger. Clecia figured they'd be tough to track down outside the castle walls. She turned to the director, but he didn't say a word. The main character purred into the man's ear that he'd passed the North Duke exam with flying colors. Clecia shook the director's hand firmly and said that for now, he was off the hook. If Tom was a bad dude, he probably wouldn't have saved that young woman in such a tight spot and stuck around. So now he doesn't have to sweat the fallout from his actions or what's coming next. Eugene thought to himself, he probably shouldn't have saved this girl in the first place, or just finished her off the second she got suspicious. It would have been way easier on him, but for some reason, he was acting weird around this woman and couldn't walk away. Clytia called out to the director, who for some reason wasn't listening, and repeated that she'd left her sword with him. Eugene explained he was keeping it safe until she came to get it. But first, they needed to find her a better outfit. The man told Luke it looked like things were pretty lively in the capital today. Eugene's secretary confirmed it, adding that, as expected, Ryan Bartier's intel was bogus and outdated. Eugene's main partner, Homer Rukin, turned around as soon as Luke mentioned that Xena's headquarters had been taken down. The Rukin family was the financial backing that allowed Eugene to create Toma Holdings. Homer had a hard time believing Xena let someone like that, with intentions like that, get so close so easily. This guy's a Xena supporter, but his goal isn't necessarily about bringing back the Servan Empire. Rukin's backing the rebels for a different reason, something with its own hidden agenda. Years ago, little Eugene vowed to revive Servan, become its ruler, and get revenge. Especially, the hero will make Jan Furs pay for everything. He's the one who caused so much suffering and loss. He promised to take down that low-down snake himself, to avenge his family and his people. Tears welled up in Eugene's eyes, and seeing this, the knight tried to support his lord in his moment of grief. After hearing all that, Homer admitted he wasn't exactly a genius when it came to politics or war. He's just a businessman who knows how to handle money, and the most important thing for a businessman is seeing potential. From that day on, Homer recognized Eugene as the sole heir to their empire and was ready to invest in his future. But the man wasn't going to invest his time and money in the empire itself, but in the young man with big ambitions. So, in other words, Homer Ryukin wasn't betting on Servan's revival, but on the potential of one single guy named Eugene. Luke said the boss went to check things out himself and get all the details on the situation. A servant came into the room and announced that the young master had returned, and he brought a lady with him. Homer and Luke froze, completely stunned by the news. The secretary heard the girl with the boss was wearing a prisoner's uniform, which raised a ton of questions. Luke asked, totally shocked, if it was the girl with the bright crimson hair, and the servant confirmed it. On top of that, the boss ordered a bath prepared for her, as well as some clean clothes so she could freshen up. Homer yelled, "What the heck is going on?" Eugene swore he wouldn't get distracted from his main goal. Luke tried to smooth things over, saying that the boss is at the age where he should be finding a partner. It's not a huge deal, right? Eugene's allowed to experience a little romance, even during these crazy times. The room went dead silent, everyone caught completely off guard and trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Homer realized right then and there that he'd made a bad call. Eugene just sighed and grabbed his head, already picturing the look on his main partner's face when he broke the news. So, yeah, he ended up having to bring this weird girl back here. Eugene couldn't just leave Klitya out on the street alone, exposed to God knows what, not after everything she'd been through. That's why he told them to clean her up and give her some fresh clothes, so she could at least feel a little more comfortable. There was absolutely nothing more to it than that, nothing personal or intimate between them. Once Eugene got her sword back to her, he could cut this whole bizarre connection between them without any further questions. Looking at the sword, the young man came to a realization. This weapon looks pretty damn old, showing its age, but it's been taken care of real well over the years. Everything points to this blade being something special, modifiable even. This weapon's a real treasure. Eugene couldn't believe she'd just forgotten it. But then she knocked, and he let her in. The guy decided to drop it. After all, the weapon wasn't his. The second he heard the door open, he was ready to welcome Klysha back. But he couldn't finish the sentence. He was speechless. The main character, grinning, announced that a hot bath was the best thing humanity ever invented. Klitya, in a light blue dress, entered the room and thanked the director for his care and attention. Eugene was thrown. He couldn't figure out why she'd changed so much in such a short time. He slapped himself hard to snap out of it and get a grip on reality. Then he handed Klysha the sword she'd left behind, and she happily took it, thanking him. Now that the item was back with its owner, our girl could have gone home, but it was already pitch black and late. So Eugene decided to offer Klitya the guest room for the night, and she thanked him for his kindness and consideration. Suddenly, Klitya remembered something and decided to bring it up right away. She asked the director if he could spare some time for her tomorrow. The next day, Klitya gave a good thrashing to the jerks who stole her stuff and caused her so much trouble. Finally, the main character was able to get her ID back and felt much more confident. All that's left is to withdraw the money from the bank, and then she can finally pay off the collateral and get rid of her debts. It was only now that Eugene remembered about the collateral. This whole debt thing was just an excuse to figure out Milady's identity, but now refusing the money would look suspicious. Now, all Eugene had to do was take the money and forget about this whole misunderstanding. But Eugene had no clue that the bank, which he thought was the end of all the chaos, was about to reveal a wild truth about Klitya. Klitya tried to explain that there was clearly some kind of mistake with her documents, but the employee assured her that wasn't the case. Their client list doesn't have anyone named Klitya Mejorino. The main character flashed her ID to prove that she really is Klitya Mejorino. The bank employee explained that she'd already double-checked everything a bunch of times. Only Isaac Mejorino is listed in the Mejorino family. The woman asked the girl to wait a sec, so she could check other families. Since Klitya wasn't on the lists, Eugene was getting more and more suspicious. Meanwhile, the bank employee was studying the lists closely. Spotting the info she needed, the woman adjusted her glasses, which glinted in the sunlight. She asked the girl to confirm if her name was Klitya Mejorino de Ferza. The bank customers, and even the employees themselves, stared in astonishment at the girl who shared the imperial family's last name. Eugene thought it was insane. Theoretically, it was only possible if Klitya was the empress. The main character flinched, realizing the situation she was in. The man looked at her, completely stunned. He didn't understand why Klitya wasn't correcting the bank employee. This couldn't possibly be true. Upon learning that Klitya was part of the imperial family, she was immediately escorted to the Sigrid Bank's VIP lounge. The main character awkwardly asked if she was really allowed to be there. The bank director, Madame Sigrid, told her not to worry, as she couldn't possibly make her wait in the main hall. They have special treatment and terms of service for members of the imperial family, but Madame was unaware of the Empress's arrival. The main character wanted to explain the whole situation, but realized there was no way she could make anyone believe this crazy story. Suddenly, Madame Sigrid realized this might be classified info, and she shouldn't be grilling the Empress. So she told Her Majesty, "You don't have to explain. Everyone's got their secrets. Now let's talk about withdrawing funds from that bank account. Unfortunately, that's a no-go right now. Your father set it up for 20 years, so you can access the money when you're 30, or with the consent of your trustee, Isaac Mejorino." The main character was floored. How could her father do this? Klitya explained she desperately needed cash, so she asked if there was another way. Madame Sigrid informed her that she had every right to withdraw funds from her lawful husband's account. And when she said husband, she was obviously talking about the emperor. Klitya asked, confused, "Wait, does the empress have the authority to withdraw state funds without the ruler's knowledge?" The woman explained that only applied to the national budget, but the emperor's personal account was always accessible to his wife. According to the government contract, the bank allows spouses to manage these assets. The main character asked them to get to the point. Madame Sigrid happily announced that if Madame wished to withdraw funds, they were ready to provide them right away from His Majesty's account. Klitya couldn't believe it could be done so easily. Come to think of it, they kinda screwed this up themselves. The error arose from a miscalculation by the palace. What's more, they still haven't even bothered to file the divorce papers. By withdrawing the money, the main character is effectively agreeing to compensation. All this time, Eugene was waiting for the young woman in the hallway, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He couldn't believe he was waiting for her. Every time I see Klitya Mejorino, she seems weirder and more offbeat than before. And there's a whole lot of shady stuff hidden behind her eccentric personality. Just when Eugene thinks he's got her figured out, something totally inexplicable happens again. Suddenly, the hero heard footsteps coming towards him. His eyes widened as the girl called out to him. The main heroine apologized for being late, explaining she just had to get some paperwork sorted. Eugene's jaw dropped when he saw the black card. That's a Sigrid Premium card, exclusively for their most VIP clients. There are less than 10 of them in the entire empire. The main heroine told the director it was time for them to go, because they still had one more extremely important thing to take care of. Madame Sigrid peeked out from behind the door, looking at the dark-haired guy with surprise. The woman had overheard the Empress call that man director. No doubt about it. A guy with a fortune bigger than some countries' entire budgets. That has to be Tom Rakin. Madame just couldn't figure out why such important people were showing up all at once. The Emperor threw a stack of papers right in his advisor's face. Again, His Majesty was furious. He's really been losing it this month. Ian couldn't wrap his head around the fact that his request was denied. The thing is, there hasn't been a single divorce in the imperial family for generations. Turns out, they recently discovered a law stating both spouses need to be present to give their consent for a divorce. Rules like that were probably put in place so the emperor couldn't just throw his weight around. Ian just sighed, wearily asking for Lady Clydia to be brought to him. But just recently, the Mejerino family envoy reported that the Viscount's daughter had gone missing. The Emperor roared, absolutely furious, demanding those dimwit morons find her immediately. Every government official bolted out of the Emperor's office, not wanting to suddenly, not be around anymore. Ian was breathing hard, trying to calm himself down. Then, annoyed, he slumped back into his chair. Looks like the girl ran to avoid being banished. But the Emperor didn't give a damn whose daughter she was. But then Ian suddenly remembered the girl's description and the fact that Sir Isaac used fire magic in battle. Sasha's image flashed in his mind, along with her indignant question about what the hell they'd been fighting for all these years. And then her confident statement that slavery was prohibited in their empire. That firestorm that leveled the whole building. It made everything crystal clear. 'Cause the Emperor finally figured things out. Advisor Miri came to Ryan to get a description of Clytia Mejerino, so he could start the search. The captain of the Knights said she has scarlet hair, almond-shaped eyes, a slightly round face, and a naive look. Oh, and she's wearing a prison uniform with the number 33,358. Miri told Sir Ryan to hold the jokes, since this is a direct order from the Emperor. But the blonde guy wasn't kidding. The Imperial advisor decided he'd just ignore the part about the uniform. He stopped dead in his tracks when the captain said, in a dead serious tone, that it was the honest-to-God truth. With a sly grin, Ryan asked the advisor if he was ready to take responsibility if he didn't write that part down, and the info turned out to be legit. Miri turned around and gave the Knight commander a bewildered look. The Emperor walked in and asked his advisor why he hadn't left for the Viscount's estate yet. The guy replied he hadn't even had time to prepare, since His Majesty gave the order just a few hours ago. A suspiciously gentle smile appeared on Ian's face. As soon as the Emperor started using the ice rune, Miri yelled out in fear that he was leaving immediately. Ryan watched with a smile as the advisor hastily wrote down all the information about the girl. Suddenly, the blonde guy asked the Earl if he was going to see Isaac Mejerino, because he wanted to tag along. Ryan had some personal business in Shamaran, so the Imperial advisor didn't object at all. Miri passed all the collected information about Lady Clytia to Sir Hans. He ordered the flyers to be turned in ASAP, because it was super urgent. Ryan reminded the Earl that they were in a hurry, and Miri exclaimed that he knew that perfectly well. Then, he told Sir Hans not to fail him and sped off. But then, one of Mr. Hans's guys ran up and told him the bills for the gym renovations had arrived. Sir Hans passed the flyer thing off to someone else, told him to finish the job, and get him sent to headquarters. The guy added it was a direct order from the Emperor, so he told him to get a move on. According to the flyer, they were looking for a VIP, and the reward was 500,000 royals. But what really caught the kid's eye was prison number 3358. The kid from Shumarin happily skipped along, carrying 2 loaves of bread. He was stoked, because he'd get to eat more today. But suddenly, he heard noises close by. And then, the kid got slammed against the wall, making him drop both loaves of bread. The fancy-pants aristocrat bared his teeth in a crooked grin, saying he'd finally managed to catch the little rat. It was that kid, the son of some big-shot official. The guy promised he'd get his hands on that ginger-haired punk sooner or later. But for now, he'd deal with the boy. The aristocrat raised his fist, yelling that the kid was going to pay for embarrassing him. The kid squeezed his eyes shut, terrified of getting punched in the face. The main character stopped the jerk with one solid kick to the guy's side. If this idiot was in the Clishan territories, she'd have broken his legs for sure. So the aristocrat should consider himself lucky. The little kid, all confused, thanked her for helping him. The main character smiled and asked the kid if he really didn't remember her, since he'd shared his bread with her. It quickly dawned on the kid. This girl's the older brother everyone's talking about. First, Eugen waits for her to get a card. Now he's trailing her down the street, which makes zero sense to the kid. The main character pulled a little pouch out of her pocket. This money's more than enough to get to Shamaran. Plus, Clytia asked him to deliver a letter. It'll get him into any establishment, and later the lady promised to take him on as staff at her estate. The kid couldn't figure out why his sister was helping him out. A warm smile spread across the main character's face. She patted the kid on the head and said warmly, she totally gets that he's had it rough back home. But this is the only place Clytia can help him, so she asked the kid to wait for her there. Soon, the main character said goodbye to the boy. All this time, Eugene was still hanging around with this girl. The lady was super nice to the kid, so the young dude wondered if they knew each other from before. The main girl cheekily replied that she was just returning the favor. Even though Clicia was high class, you could tell from the jump that she wasn't like other nobles. Where else are you going to find a noblewoman who knows martial arts? Clicia explained that she'd been around the front lines since she was a kid, so she never really noticed the class divide. Her title blinded her to the struggles that regular folks go through. But thanks to that same title, now the main character could at least help them out somehow. Clicia realized she'd been rambling a bit, so she apologized to her companion. She flashed her black card and promised the guy that she could definitely pay him back this time. This girl's got an imperial bloodline. She's been fighting since she was a kid, wields a rare fire rune, and now she's got a black card too. But what's way more important is what her connection to the Emperor is. Eugene suddenly realized he absolutely doesn't want to let this girl go, but he has no idea how to keep her. The main character announced that it was time for them to leave. Clicia turned around as soon as Tom called out to her. As far as the young man remembered, he'd already scored over 90 points. Remembering this, the main character confirmed his words. Clicia herself told Eugene that once he scored 90 points or higher, she'd gladly let him take her. And just a little while ago, the lady herself said that he scored 95 points. Eugene took a step towards Clicia and reminded her. She said she'd let him have her. So now he's curious to know if the lady's words still hold true. The main character confidently stated that doing that was a seriously bad idea. All kidding aside, she can't actually let herself get kidnapped, even if she did give permission. Honestly, Clicia had no clue what got into Tom at that moment, or why he was acting like that. The hero told Milady that she intrigued him, but she figured it happened right after she got the card. Eugene replied that it wasn't about that at all. He's just afraid they'll lose touch after he pays up. And the guy wants to get to know Milady better. But it's like there's an unbreachable wall between them. The main character froze and stared at the hero, baffled, when he asked if there wasn't any other way. Eugene was a little surprised when she abruptly turned away from him, like something really upset her. The young woman announced that they were now heading to the bank. Clicia's 21 now. She spent her whole childhood on the battlefield, then finally got to enjoy a peaceful life at the estate. Graduated top of her class from Shumaran Academy, and read over 100 novels about the Northern Duke as part of the curriculum. Only problem? Zero experience with actual relationships, and that fact seriously bugged her. And now this jerk, who knows he's hot, is trying to seduce her. Eugene didn't get it. Didn't the young lady want this? Wasn't she having a good time hanging with him? Whatever, didn't matter, 'cause the Duke of the North wasn't letting her go now, no way. The main character spun around and told the headmaster to listen up. Like, super carefully. She was about to get back to her point, but suddenly a flyer smacked her in the face with some seriously wild stuff on it. The air went dead quiet, like everyone was frozen, waiting to see what would happen next, how they'd react. Eugene was fighting like hell to keep from cracking up. The whole thing was just too damn funny to him. But the instant the young woman indignantly asked what that was, his face went serious and focused again. Eugene stepped closer to the girl to figure out what was up and what exactly had her so worked up. His eyes widened in surprise the moment he saw what was on the flyer and realized how serious things were. 21-year-old Clicia Mejerino was wanted for questioning in connection with some serious offenses. It described a young woman with bright red hair and almond-shaped eyes. Form number 3358. Currently in hiding and wanted for some heavy stuff. The warning said that the wanted person possesses great power, so approach with extreme caution if encountered. According to the imperial family's urgent decree, the reward is 500,000 ruel, which is like the cost of 100 houses. Meanwhile, Ryan's horse caught up to the carriage, which was speeding down the road towards its destination. The captain of the knights knocked on the carriage window and called for Count Miri. The imperial advisor peeked out of the carriage, and Ryan immediately noticed the guy looked like he was about to hurl. No sooner had the carriage stopped than Count Miri puked his guts out. Ryan said the advisor needed to toughen up, but Miri retorted they'd been hauling ass at full speed for a solid week already. The blonde declared, "You can't just sit in a carriage the whole time. You gotta at least hop on a horse and get some fresh air now and then." And then the captain of the knights chimed in, saying this was where they'd be parting ways. Ryan had mentioned earlier he had some personal business in Shumaran, so Miri asked what that was all about. The blonde just gave a cryptic reply about needing to check something out. The count thought that was weird. He couldn't remember Sir Ryan ever voluntarily leaving the capital. Vicon, lying on the bed with an ice pack on his head, greeted the imperial advisor. And then Isaac Measurino started coughing like his lungs were going to come up. "My apologies, Count Miri. I'm not feeling my best," the man said. The advisor explained he was there to find out the last time Klitschia had been in contact, but the Viscount started coughing again. Isaac said that ever since his daughter disappeared, his health had gone downhill, and now he couldn't even get out of bed. Miri saw right through this charade, so he didn't understand why the Viscount didn't want to find his daughter. For his part, Klitschya's father hoped the Imperial advisor hadn't suspected anything. The Viscount said sadly that he didn't know where his daughter had gone in the middle of the night, but hoped she'd be found soon. The Imperial advisor let out a heavy sigh. He apologized to the Viscount, but said he had to say this, and then reached for his briefcase. According to Article 12, relatives of the Imperial family are obligated to take all measures to protect them. That means Viscount Measurino must use every available resource to find Lady Klitschia. The Viscount explained he was short-staffed and couldn't really spare anyone for a search, but Earl Miri wasn't buying it. He reminded Sir Isaac that the Order of the Red Lion served under him. The Viscount protested that his order was disbanded after the war, but Miri argued it was time to bring them back. This is the perfect opportunity. Even if it's a clerical error, Lady Klitschia is technically the Emperor's wife right now. We can't just brush that off. Earl Miri was counting on the Viscount's cooperation, so he promised to provide all the resources he needed. Isaac turned away from the advisor and replied that he would get right on it as soon as he was feeling better. The Imperial advisor remembered all the trouble he went through to get to this place. Suddenly, he collapsed to the ground. Viscount Isaac shot out of bed, and the terrified maids rushed to the advisor to see what was wrong. Count Miri said he was just tired from the road. He suddenly felt dizzy from the long trip, but the Viscount still had to obey the Emperor's orders. Isaac flopped back into bed and wailed about how much his heart suddenly hurt. Count Miri, for his part, announced that his vision was starting to go dark. Who will emerge victorious from this showdown? The Imperial Guard loudly drew the attention of all citizens. An emergency warrant was issued for the arrest of Klitschia Measurino. Anyone who sees her should immediately report it to the Guard. It even got to the point where the guards were approaching and questioning every girl with scarlet hair. Hiding in a small alley, Eugene told the young woman that they could rest here for a bit. Looking at the flyer with her picture on it, the main character cursed under her breath. That blonde pretty boy knight from the palace was to blame for everything, and Klitschia swore she'd take him out herself. Out of nowhere, Eugene threw his cloak around her. Things were getting hairy, so the guy asked her if she had someplace safe to lay low. The main character gave a nervous smile and wondered if the director's offer was still on the table. After a while, the heroes arrived at Tamarica, the capital city's port. Eugene offered his hand and helped the young lady step out of the carriage. Now the main character finally got a good look at the capital's biggest port. But Klitschia still couldn't wrap her head around how things had gotten so messed up. First, they unjustly threw her in the slammer, which made Klitschia bolt, and now she's a wanted woman. But what was really bugging the main character was why this guy was staring so hard at her. Her train of thought was cut off by the director, who, with a smile, told her they'd be setting sail. The main character nodded. Right now, he was the only one she could trust. "Do we have to go by sea?" Klitschia asked the director. She figured they could just lay low somewhere, but Eugene said that was a problem. "The bounty on Milady is way too high to just hide her. I'd have to get other people involved. Some of them would definitely be tempted by that kind of money, and none of those people are completely trustworthy. We might even pick up some unwanted company on the way to the port, so we need to move fast." "Wait, you have a ship ready?" Klitschia asked the director, confused. The main character was stunned when he said they'd be crossing the ocean on Nar, his ship. The young woman started looking around, trying to figure out what ship they were talking about. Her jaw dropped when she saw the boat, and she just stared at it, totally bewildered. "Seriously?" Klitschia asked, confused. "That thing's supposed to go far?" Eugene called out to her, "Milady!" and pointed in the direction she should be looking. He tilted his head up and pointed at his ship. It was a vessel of absolutely gigantic proportions. It was equipped with a supercharged magical engine and hundreds of cabins with all kinds of entertainment. This cruise liner, owned by Tom Tourism, was called the Tabo Sonic. The main character's jaw hit the floor at the sheer size of the thing. She asked the director, a little freaked out, "Are we really sailing on that thing?" And Eugene just nodded. The guy offered his hand and she took it. The dark-haired dude mysteriously told her this flight was exclusively for her. Klitschia tried not to show it, but she'd been feeling super down lately. She's got incredible guts and willpower, which helps her face anything that comes her way. But it seemed like one thing after another kept hitting her hard, from the marriage to being wanted by the authorities. But now, sitting on this ship, she felt like she could finally catch a break. That kind of stuff would wear anyone out. And finally, she could take a deep breath, spreading her arms wide. Eugene asked her, confused, what she was doing. And Klitschko replied that it was every girl's dream. Suddenly, Clydia told the director that it was probably a weird time to ask this, but wasn't he worried that helping a fugitive on the run was putting his squeaky clean rep way too much on the line? Plus, the capital's bound to notice a ship like that suddenly setting sail. Eugene suggested they hash all this out over dinner. Our girl agreed, and the hero helped her get seated. Then, with a flourish, he snapped his fingers. Servants immediately swarmed Klitschko, ready to cater to her every whim. The director sat down across from her and assured her they were safe for the moment. The Tabo Sonic is following an exclusive route cleared by the Furza Empire, so there's nothing to sweat. Then, the guy pulled out a map and slapped it on the table. Besides, they're headed to a super popular spot with Tom Tourism's clientele, specifically the Duchy of Floria. It's the only place in the whole empire that's got any real independence. The main character's eyes lit up when she heard that name. Empire Everyday Newspaper said you gotta visit at least once in your life. It's the #1 spot for vacation getaways, and the top choice for honeymoons. Eugene smiled and agreed with her. The man picked up a glass of expensive liquor and asked the lady if she was finally gonna reveal her true identity to him. If the girl he's helping turns out to be the deposed empress, he's really sticking his neck out. Klitschko considered his words. The director really went to bat for her, so she figured there wasn't much point in keeping secrets. So Klitschko agreed to spill the beans. Floria is this beautiful island, south of the massive continent of Ashi, a real tourist hotspot. It's got a mild, comfortable climate year-round, plus emerald seas and gorgeous coral reefs. No kidding, people call this amazing island paradise on Earth, packed with wonders and beauty. Barefoot on the warm sand, the main character started squealing with joy. 'Cause they finally made it to Floria. Eugene followed behind, carrying her shoes, watching her excitement with interest. Clycia happily told the Duke the newspaper wasn't lying. The sand really was soft, like smooth silk. The guy warned her that running around barefoot could be risky, but the young girl confidently said nothing would happen to her. But suddenly, she ran smack into something. Clycia hit the ground, totally confused, and asked who put a pole on the shore. Turns out, she was way off. The tan dude apologized to the miss, offered her a hand, and helped her get back on her feet. This blonde guy with green eyes and a killer smile asked if she was hurt, real concerned and all. The main character was speechless, totally blown away and starstruck, just staring at him in awe. Standing right in front of her was Andrew Fami de Floria, the 12th Prince of Floria, the guy she'd heard about. Realizing who it was, Clycia jumped up and greeted Your Highness, but the blonde told her to drop the formalities. Staring at the guy's exposed chest, the main character stammered that she'd definitely keep things casual. Eugene reminded them he was still there, and Andrew immediately said, all happy, that it had been way too long. Clycia was stoked that the Duke knew the prince, but Eugene explained it was just a business thing. The blonde realized that this beautiful girl was his friend's companion, and that threw him for a loop. Then, he plucked a bright flower from his necklace, wondering how to compliment her. The main girl froze, her heart pounding as the prince tucked the flower behind her ear. Golden hibiscus grows uniquely in Floria, so Andrew thought it would perfectly complement her fiery red hair. The prince gladly welcomed the guests to their beautiful Floria, promising them an unforgettable and fun vacation. Eugene knew the blonde was back at it the second he saw a girl. He just starts laying on the charm. But the hero didn't realize he was hitting her type, because Clycia is into the Northern Duke's vibe. Glancing at the girl, Eugene noticed how red her face had gotten from embarrassment. She stepped closer to the prince and boldly asked what he meant by an unforgettable vacation for them all. Andrew suggested visiting the night market, where they could see lots of interesting things and entertainment for tourists. Unable to withstand the tense atmosphere, the man decided to jump into the conversation between the two young people. He told Milady it was time they headed back to their lodgings. Milady's current look and outfit weren't exactly right for this area, so Eugene suggested finding something more suitable. The Duke's actions really piqued Andrew's interest. While Clydia was going on about needing something the color of hibiscus, Eugene turned and gave the blonde guy a stone-cold look. Andrew chuckled, because he definitely wasn't expecting that. Later, at the Rican mansion in Floria, the 12th prince threw open the door and greeted his dear friend again. A dark aura hung around Eugene, but he still tried to force a smile. It hadn't even been 30 minutes since they parted ways. But the blonde asked his friend not to be so frosty. Andrew asked the dark-haired guy where his companion was, and Eugene said she'd gone shopping. Looks like she enjoys picking out outfits. This is gonna take a while. Eugene's gaze hardened the second the blonde sadly said he wished he could admire her beauty one more time. Catching the change in the Duke's mood, Andrew threw up his hands and told his friend to chill. Times might be different now, but did the prince really have the nerve to come after a woman who belonged to his Grace Servan? Eugene said that Clecia wasn't his woman, but Andrew decided to stay out of their business from then on. The prince decided to change the subject. Told the dark-haired guy he'd heard some pretty juicy rumors. Sounds like things are going crazy over at the Emperor's palace. Andrew was curious if Eugene was behind all the commotion. Although, I guess what's happening back on the mainland isn't really his problem. He still wanted to stay neutral after all. Floria's their prized jewel, so Andrew won't let it become a pawn in the Empire's games. Meanwhile, back at the Mejerino estate, Isaac Mejerino crossed his arms and addressed Count Miri. The Viscount demanded the Imperial advisor put an end to this nonsense. Miri replied he could barely understand a word the guy was saying. That good-for-nothing's been laid up in bed for weeks now, hasn't even twitched. The Count, on the other hand, was perfectly content. He could lie around like this his whole life to avoid work. Suddenly, a maid burst into the room. The girl breathlessly announced that a letter had just arrived from the capital. Miri practically jumped out of his skin when he heard they'd put a 500,000 rule bounty on Lady Clicia's head. And get this, they're saying she was spotted in the docks in the middle of the night with some shady dude. All we know so far is they boarded a ship belonging to Tom Holdings. Miri bolted out of bed, saying he's heading back to the capital ASAP, that this is his fault, and he'll fix it. But then, out of nowhere, Isaac Mejerino stopped him. Sometimes you gotta let folks fly to help them grow. So the Viscount didn't want to get involved directly. But now that some lowlife's messing with his daughter, Isaac can't just sit on his hands. The man told Alice to get everything ready for departure, since he's heading to the capital too. Meanwhile, back the other way, Count Miri was on his way to Viscount Mejerino's estate. Captain of the Guard, Ryan Bartier de Ferza, headed straight for the Chimaran Academy. Cletia Mejerino, the girl who became the real empress by some crazy fluke. Ryan figured there was nothing to worry about when they first met. But somehow she's connected to Eugene Servan. Plus, there's some kind of link between his older brother and her father too. Now Ryan just needs to find the missing pieces. The best way to do that is to launch his own investigation. The door to the room slowly creaked open, and a woman appeared in the doorway. Cornelia Ember, president of the current Northern Duchy Research Center, asked what he needed. Ryan stood in front of her and said he was pleased to make her acquaintance. Clecia Mejerino's official records only had 2 lines about her: graduate of the Chimaran Academy's architecture program and founder of the CIGS Scientific Society. This mysterious society's goals are unclear, as is the exact meaning of its name. Everything points to it being a regular student interest group, but is that really the case? Ryan wanted to introduce himself, but Cornelia suddenly said that in CIGS, a person's identity isn't as important as their passion for research. Freedom of scientific thought is a fundamental right for all citizens of the Empire, and even the Emperor's power can't suppress it. Ryan didn't understand what was going on, so he asked the girl to explain what she meant. Cornelia reminded the blonde that he had requested information about their activities and a list of all CIGS members. But that kind of information can't just be revealed. So the brunette asked what the man's purpose was. Ryan wasn't really expecting to learn anything important, but it looks like this isn't just some ordinary organization. The guy grinned and said their goals were aligned, because he was all about research too. He'd always been fascinated by this stuff, especially since there wasn't a more effective group in the whole empire doing it. Cornelia's cheeks flushed just a little. She decided to give him an entrance exam to make sure he was really a good fit for their crew. Ryan found the whole thing hilarious, since even the top brains at the capital's academy called him a genius. Cornelia kicked things off with the first question. She asked him to pick the right color combo and rattled off a few choices. Ryan was taken aback when she pulled out a stopwatch and started timing him. The guy was lost, wondering if it was some kind of code. Looks like there's a hidden meaning in these color combinations, which means the blondie's gonna have to take a wild guess. Time's up, which means Ryan failed the test. The captain of the guard shot out of his seat and told the girl to hang on a sec. He wanted to double-check that the question was worded correctly. Suddenly, Cornelia Ember stopped dead in her tracks. This girl submitted a paper on interpretive geometry at 11 and proved the Kurtma theorem at 14. By 17, the scientific community recognized her as a genius and gave her the title of scholar. But she turned down a high-profile job in the capital and chose to stay at the small Shumaran Academy instead. Rumor has it she was drawn to some specific area of research. Ryan asked if the question shouldn't have had some clarification. Cornelia asked them to choose the right color combination, but didn't even say what they meant. "Are you sure you want to join the CISG?" the girl asked the guard captain sharply. "When you don't even know the basics?" Cornelia decided to give him one last shot, impressed by his eagerness. Handing him a sheet, she told Ryan to study the fundamentals on his own, and then try the test again. It was covered in symbols and numbers. Cornelia added that the door to truth only opens for those who dedicate themselves to knowledge. While Ryan studied the paper, she left. Soon, the blonde guy headed to the Shumaran Academy library. Just like he thought, the code on the sheet was just the library's book numbering system. The guard captain was still wondering why such a serious organization had set up shop in a backwater like this. The deeper he got, the more Ryan wanted to crack this mystery wide open. Blondie decided to dive right into the first book, figuring he'd get to the truth and dig up the facts faster that way. The first book was called The Immortal Love of the Duke of the Northern Lands. Besides being the captain of the guard, Ryan Bartier de Furza owns a ton of land up north in the Empire. And get this, he owns it as a duke, which makes him a real deal northern duke. Then Ryan started checking out the second book, where this girl spends most of the story begging the duke to let her go. The third book was all about how obsessed the northern duke is with his darling, and another book was about how to win the heart of the ruler of the northern lands. Ryan slammed the latest book shut. He felt like an idiot. Faced with real knowledge, a man realizes just how small he is. Ryan finally gets what's going on here. Clydia's probably with Eugene because of his fancy title. Guess Ryan's gotta step up and show them who the real Duke of the North is.